And viewers, this is not just another gunfire scare in America. This happened at the White House Correspondents Dinner, which is one of Washington's most symbolic power events, where US President, the First Lady, Vice President, cabinet members, top journalists and also public figures gather under one roof. It is the annual meeting point of power and the press. And that room of influence turned into a room of panic when 31-year-old Cole Allen Thomas barged in, breached security and opened fire at least 8 times before being overpowered by the security. Here's what Donald Trump said when he addressed the media after the situation was brought under control.
The man has been captured. They're going to his apartment. I guess he lives in California. And he's a sick person, a very sick person. And we don't want things like this to happen. I think it's very important that I say, though, and I told the representatives of the evening, they did such a beautiful job. It was such a beautiful evening. And again, they're talking about free speech in our Constitution. That's what it's all about, not just White House correspondents. It was really based on free speech in our Constitution. I want to thank the First Lady for, that was a rather traumatic experience for her. There was a lot of action taking place up there very quickly.
Saurabh Shukla, founder and editor-in-chief of News Mobile and White House correspondent, was also inside the room when the gunfire was reported at the White House Correspondents Dinner in Washington. He witnessed the moment panic broke out as attendees also ducked for cover, and the Secret Service rushed President Donald Trump out within seconds. And he's joining us live with a first-hand account of what exactly unfolded inside the venue. Saurabh, take us through what exactly happened, that exact moment. What did you hear first, and how did you realize it was gunfire?
You know, I was there at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with my wife. We were seated not too far away from where the president was seated, very close to the dais. We were towards the front. I had him on the line of sight. I was actually observing what the president was doing, and suddenly I heard a gunshot. Obviously, as a journalist, you know, covered war zones, and obviously I know exactly what a gunshot sounds. And my first instinct was to just look around, and I saw the Secret Service agent who was standing right on one of the corners for President Trump, ducking immediately, trying to cover him. On one hand, and I looked around, I saw several Secret Service agents rushing around the hall. It was like the main hall where the dinner was being held had who's who of the US, had almost 80% of the Trump cabinet. I had spoken to some of these cabinet members ahead of the dinner. We were just chatting about what is the president's speech going to be. And obviously, they were all excited about it. President himself had mentioned that he was looking forward to the speech. And suddenly it happened. And then I saw towards the back of the hall, I saw a rush of Secret Service agents with their guns out. There was a Secret Service agent right near where our table was. She had her gun out, and obviously, and our instinct was we all ducked for cover under the tables. Most of the guests did. And then I saw, you know, while we were ducked there, some Secret Service agents jumping over. Once President Trump and the First Lady was taken out of the hall, then and the Vice President, then obviously they had so many protectees, which are these cabinet members all over the hall. So they were then trying to get them out. And then by that time, this is the video which has been circulated now, because by that time, the Secret Service, they deserve full credit for bravely tackling this assassin outside the hall. If the assassin would have entered the hall, there would have been a disaster. You know, the fact that I'm talking to you, we're all alive and safe. And this is what I mentioned to President Trump when I asked him that question at the White House briefing, that I think whatever happened, they bravely handled it. And then post that, we all stayed because they had locked the hall doors because they wanted to sanitize it. They wanted to rule out there were no other shooters in the vicinity or anybody was inside that hall. And then we were all taken through the emergency exit through the kitchen door of the Hilton Hotel in an orderly manner. The dispersal was completely smooth, where obviously the local police and all were guiding us. It was completely sanitized. And obviously the security has been beefed up. I was at the White House post that I heard that President Trump is going to speak to the media. So some of us who have the White House access were able to get into that briefing, and I was able to get a question to him as well. What was commendable was that I can tell you that straight after this incident, President Trump has had several attempts on his life. He was there to speak to us. In full transparency, his entire cabinet, all the senior officials were there. The First Lady was there talking to us, and obviously President Trump explained what happened, and rest, obviously, we have to wait for the investigations, what will unravel, whether this assassin had any accomplice, how did he manage to get inside that zone, even though he was tackled outside the actual dinner venue. But it's providence that we are all safe, and I'm also talking to you on your show.
Absolutely. And, all of us are glad that all those who were present there are safe. But Saurabh, you've covered the White House closely. You put a question to President Trump, like you were talking about. And when you asked about the corrective measures, how did President Trump come across in that moment to you personally? Was he shaken? Was he defiant? Or was he completely in control?
I tell you, I was one of the first to interview President Trump from South Asia early on, and several times when Prime Minister Modi visited the White House, I asked him, and first question, then again he got me to ask another question. So I, dealt that I've known him. So I can tell you, you have to commend President Trump. He was not shaken at all. Anybody else would not do a briefing half an hour after this incident has happened. He was there, and he also said, in reference, if you see, in response to my question, he also spoke about Iran, that he's determined to go ahead and do it. So I think that's commendable. And the fact that his entire team, America, was standing with him, that shows the resilience, whatever people may say about the president, that, on various things, whether he, but on this moment today, when I was in that room asking that question, I was right there. Standing next to me was Marco Rubio. If you see the visuals, you're right. It's a small room. It's like, and we were all shaken. I was talking to my other colleagues from other networks who were all there, because it could have been us. If this assassin would have entered that room with the kind of weapons the person had, who knows what would have happened. So I would say that resilience, and this is the time, as he mentioned as well, time for unity, and also to make sure that wherever this motive, whatever the motive is, and that the good thing is the person has been caught alive.
Yes.
Like it happened in 26/11 when we got Ajmal Kasab live. So it unraveled a lot of things, I hope. And this is what is going to happen. And he's promised to come back to us. Director FBI was there. Kash Patel was there. His Homeland Secretary was there, and Attorney General, all of them. And obviously, they're working through the night to make sure that the answers are there. Because obviously, America, not only America, the entire world's attention is focused on this incident.
Saurabh, I know there should be no speculation, but yes, Iran has been mentioned. There were questions also asked by correspondents who were present, like your colleagues in the American media who also asked him about the Iran link, to which Donald Trump says that you never know. But from what you saw and heard on the ground, is there any detail, any insight that has come out yet, that we don't know, that our viewers in India should know?
I won't. As a responsible journalist, I'll never hazard any guess, and we should not do it as a responsible network. You should not do it either. I would say let's wait for the investigation to unravel what will happen. But certainly, as a journalist who's covered national security as well, I would definitely know for a fact that they're going to do a threadbare inquiry. In fact, it shows the transparency. I haven't seen many other incidents where the footage of this assassin getting handled by Secret Service is released so quickly. So I think you will see some kind of a investigation unraveling what really happened. Did this person have any accomplice in the hotel? Did he manage to get those things? Because, I entered those security, there was a full-blown security protocol. They had blocked roads, as happens when the US president was there. It was orderly, but everything was getting checked. My wife's handbag, she had a small clutch bag that was checked. And, so many of our other colleagues, who had things. You couldn't get things out. And they had a strict protocol on what time you can enter. At 7 o'clock, we were supposed to enter the ballroom. Before that, they had sanitized it completely. Before that, there was a reception. In fact, the area where this assassin was tackled was just where we had a reception early on in the evening. So I'm glad, and this is what I mentioned to President Trump as well, that I'm glad that he was safe and all of us are safe, and all the people who were there in that ballroom. So it was something. It was a harrowing experience. Let me say it to your viewers.
An harrowing experience, and that's what President Donald Trump also said. He said that the First Lady was traumatized. It was a traumatic experience, and now investigations will reveal more about the shooter who has been caught alive. Thank you so much, Saurabh, for joining us on this broadcast. With that, viewers, it's time for us to slip into a short commercial break.